Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder of Streamlined Properties and the team leader of Streamlined Properties on Market, brokered by eXp Realty. Whether you are looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Welcome back to another week of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green. And hey, heads up, this is a veteran episode, meaning our guest, Buddy Rushing, is a former Marine. So if you're in the military, have been in the military, these are great episodes. There's been several of them just to see how they did it. Buddy's going to talk about how he went from deployment to deal flow. And before we get to the episode, I just want to give you the one reminder for this week is, hey, we have those 10-minute clips on YouTube, so it's video. It's just 10 minutes. It's usually 4 highlights. You can put a face to the name so you can see us, and then you can go on about your day, listen to the podcast wherever you do, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anything else. But I think it's a great way to kind of see who you're listening to. Then go ahead, listen to the whole episode on your podcast provider of choice. Let's go. This is episode 89 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Buddy Rushing. Buddy is the CEO and founder of White Feather Investments. Their mission is to educate and empower military members to achieve financial freedom through real estate investing. He is a former Marine. Buddy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I want to say publicly, I'm a co-founder. The other founder is my wife, Kimberly. And if she heard you say that I'm the only founder, she would come right to your doorstep.
Yeah, and you are both in the picture, but it said founder. But that's very important, though, because there's a lot of husbands and wives, partners who have found these together. So we'll definitely get into that. I'm excited to talk to you about it. First, I want to know is when was the first time that you remember real estate being something in your mind that, you know, became what it is now? Like, when was the first time you remember thinking like, ooh, that could be something?
I remember exactly the first time. I was on deployment to Afghanistan in 2005, and we were in Southeast Paktika province, and that was when everybody was in Iraq. So Afghanistan was the absolute Wild West. And so I was on an embedded training team, which is a small team of Marines that goes in and embeds with the Afghan soldiers and teaches them how to fight and teaches them how to patrol and do all this other stuff, and then you take them into combat. And we were on a long-range what's called a reconnaissance patrol, and we were in an armored vehicles, basically. And so I was in this armored vehicle, and what happens when you're in this long row of armored vehicles trying to go somewhere through IED-infested terrain is it's slow. It's so slow. So you think you see movies and it's like these people just blasting down the road. That is not the case. You go so slow, right? Because an IED can destroy a vehicle, but like they're armored vehicles. So if you get ambushed, you don't care. We've got bigger guns than they do. So you don't mind going slow. A lot of people don't realize that. They're like, oh, you drive so fast to prevent ambushes. No, we'll smoke them if they ambush us. But if we hit an IED, it's done, right? Right. And so that was the mentality, at least. So anyway, all that to say, we were going very slow for a very long amount of time, and I was bored. And so I was sitting in what's called the A driver's seat, which is the passenger seat. And you know, I was looking around and I looked to my left between the seat and the radio mounts. There was a little purple book under there. And so I pulled out this book, and you know, of course, exactly what book I'm talking about. It was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read Rich Dad. I read it out of sheer boredom. And I remember about 2-3 pages in, I was like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. And I read the entire thing, and then I read the entire thing again. And, you know, it's a quick read. You can read it in, a few hours. And it's a simple book, right? It's not this like big, complex academic study. It's a very simple book. And it convinced me that my past didn't have to equate to my future. Because I grew up in East Tennessee on food stamps. And so like, that's all I knew. Being wealthy wasn't a possibility in my town. growing up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, is that part of why you went though to the military as well?
It is. It is. I went to the military because I couldn't afford to go to pay for college. And so I actually went to the Naval Academy in Maryland. And so you actually can go there even if you don't have any money. If you get accepted, it's very difficult to get accepted, but they pay for it. And in exchange, you give them years of service afterwards. Right. That's the agreement. But yeah, I was going to go to LSU, but I couldn't afford to. And so I always had wanted to serve. My father was a Marine, and I always wanted to serve my country. I always thought that it looked exciting, enticing, and so on. But yeah, even though it's not very romantic to say, I went there initially because they paid for the school.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's history there, but it's interesting to know that you went there to get out of, to upgrade how you grew up. But then this little purple book sitting in the middle here, and other people are thinking, I mean, that sounds pretty busy to be driving through landmines. And you're like, let me just read a book. And that's a difference between understanding what it's like to be on deployment, but also know like, hey, hopefully I'm coming back from this. And when I come back, I'm going to have to figure out what to do. Was that something in your mind as well? And a lot of the guys that you were with?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that you do on deployment is you talk about all the big things you're going to do whenever you get back, right? And part of it is self-preservation, right? Because you see so many people dying. Yeah. I mean, you see how frail life is when you see people die just like that, right? And so part of it is you're talking about these big things to keep yourself from thinking, of the fear. And so, we were talking about that. But here's the thing, like, a lot of people join the military to get out of bad situations or to try to upgrade their life, like you said. But how many, like, think about this. Like, do you equate military service with financial freedom?
I don't. Yeah,
no one does.
I know from my previous military guests that they didn't either, because they all found the book or something similar while they were on deployment to figure out, hey, what's that going to be like? And some didn't figure that out till they got home. And then it's harder. There's no plan in place at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And so you see people, they serve in the military, and then, they get out, and a lot of times their life and their lifestyle degrades after service. Sure. That's the common story, right? And it's unfortunate. It doesn't have to be that way. It's just, whenever you're, especially in like the Marine Corps, you're in a very structured environment. You're told where to be, what to do. You're supported in all aspects. You're supported financially. You have a mission and a purpose. As soon as you leave, as soon as you take off the uniform, all of that goes away.
Yeah.
Right? The income, the camaraderie, the community, the structure, the mission, and the purpose, all of it goes away.
Yeah.
Imagine what that does to your system.
Yeah, I think from the outside, some people could think like, oh, great, you finally have freedom. But it's like, well, I don't even know what to do. You're used to just be going through your day, looking at the schedule, and everything is so, has to be on point or else it's not going to work out. And then, you're home adjusting to something new, but also having to figure out like, okay, well, if I'm out now for good, what's the scale? Like, a lot of, if you went in when you were young, it's not like you're coming out knowing like, hey, I know exactly what I'm going to do right now.
Yeah, exactly. And that unknown, I mean, it really does. The training obviously doesn't really prepare you for that, right? The training prepares you to do the ordinary in extreme situations. Well, how often in the civilian world do you need to do the ordinary in extreme situations?
Yeah.
No, you're mostly doing the ordinary in ordinary situations, right?
Yeah. Waiting in an SUV in a car line at school to pick up kids isn't really the same as driving through a field with these IEDs. I mean,
exactly, right?
Yeah.
But the stresses are nevertheless real. They're just different. And so, for me, to answer your question, that book allowed me to dream and gave me permission to believe that I could change the legacy of poverty that my family had come from.
Yeah.
But that's all I had. I had that dream. And that sounds romantic, but if you don't pair that with pragmatic, actionable education, then you get hurt. And that's what happened to me when I came back.
Yeah. So, well, tell us what happened. I mean, you read the book, you have an idea of what you want to do, but what did it take to finally take action? What led to that?
Well, I didn't have any problem taking action. So my tendency is to act first and then think, right? And so I did. I'll just tell you the story. So I I got back from Afghanistan. I was stationed in Okinawa. That's where we launched to Afghanistan from. And then I came back and I was stationed in California. And there's a place in California near Palm Springs called 29 Palms, California. 29 Palms is a Marine base. It's in the middle of the desert, the middle of nowhere, right? And so I got stationed there. So I drove in, and my plan, and this sounds so funny, Jonathan, like my plan was I'm going to buy old beat up house, renovate it, and then sell it and make a bunch of money, right? That in and of itself, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
But that's all I knew. And so I ended up buying an old unrenovated piece of crap house in June of 2007 with the intent to renovate it over the course of a year or two and then flip it. June of 2007. What was happening to the market in June of 2007?
It's coming for you.
It's the bottom's dropping out.
Yeah.
So I spent all of the money that I had been saved up in Afghanistan, renovated this house over 2 years. And when we finished renovation and got it appraised, it was worth half of what I bought it for unrenovated. So that was what happened when I took this just idea, but no education, and I acted on it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really good point, because I think like a lot of people out there are pushing always take action, and it is important to take action, but maybe you weren't ready at that time, where you couldn't have obviously predicted a market crash and things like that, but maybe there's more things you could have learned in the meantime before, which meant taking action on education, and learning and maybe meeting more investors instead of just going right in and figuring it out. I mean, I'm sure it turned into a great lesson for you, though.
Well, okay. So not only did it turn into a great lesson, it actually turned into a great investment. And this is one of the things that I learned about real estate. The power of time is, in my opinion, the power of time beats everything else, right? I bought that house for $152,000 unrenovated, put 30 grand into it. It appraised for 69,000, fully renovated 2 years later. I couldn't sell it. Right. So I had to rent it out. And I rented it out, and I still own it. And I, restructured the financing and everything like that. It's now worth $280,000, and it's rented for like $1,600 a month, and it cash flows, right? My mortgage is $600 a month. And so it is now a very high cash flowing property with a ton of equity. And I didn't do anything to it after that renovation except rent it out and just move on with my life. Right. Well,
yeah, so, I mean, I think you didn't let fear take hold and just dump it, turn it into some type of disaster. You just figured out a way to get through it and keep it active.
And that's what everybody was doing at that time. And by the way, when I rented it out, I was losing money on it every month. Right. And so it wasn't like, oh, we'll rent it out and make money. No, it was, I have to rent it out because if I let this thing go, then this was a huge waste. And I believe that, we can potentially use the power of time to like have it heal some of the wounds. But it also, so I learned the awesome power of time with rental real estate. But to your point of not letting fear get in the way, one of the things that we realized whenever we realized that house had lost half its value is that entire town had lost half its value. But, and here's a question for you. Let's see, you're a savvy guy. So you're in a military town. It's 2009. War in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, troop strength getting plussed up, government pouring tons of money into the military. Part of the military pay is basic allowance for housing, BAH. They use that allowance for housing to pay for mortgages, to pay for rent, whatever. If troop strength is being plussed up and money's being poured into the military, what do you think's happening to BAH?
I mean, it should be good for you if you're going to rent your property. That's what I'm thinking. I'm just thinking like how you're going to do it.
Yep, you just jump straight to it. So yes, BAH is going up, which means that rent is going up. So in this town where all of the properties have lost half their value, the rent's actually higher than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because,
that makes sense. And
so now you have properties that you can buy for $60,000, $70,000 that you can rent for $900 a month, right?
Yeah. Was there something though about the fact that you were still losing money, but you were also making money? Did you start to see the voyage, like if it just wasn't in a crash, that like long term you thought you could get through it because money was coming in, even though it wasn't as much as you had hoped?
Yeah. I mean, it was really just about survive, right? Just hold on and survive. But instead of focusing on what we were losing and how to mitigate the pain and the damage, what we had realized was that you can, like, if we're going to get to our dream of financial freedom, then we're going to have to create more positive income streams. And here's an opportunity. There's an opportunity in every single crash, in every single disaster, mistake, lesson. There's an opportunity there. And I had one of my mentors tell me one time, like, never, ever waste a good opportunity to learn something, right?
Yeah.
And your mistakes and your failures are those best opportunities to learn. They're way more than your successes. You're not going to learn much from your successes. You're going to start getting tempted to think that you're awesome and you can do no wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Then you'll get a bigger one.
Think about this. How many people started investing in 2000, 2001, and by 2006, they were writing books and appearing on podcasts and teaching educational courses because everything they touched turned to gold. Remember that, right?
Yeah,
none of those people
I remember.
Were in business in 2009.
Yeah,
right?
No, they went bankrupt in Texas buying 90 units on very, very high leverage.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, that's that. I think I'm very grateful that my first experience, and I dragged my wife into this as well because she was my girlfriend, and then we ended up getting married while we were doing this. And so when we started out our marriage, I had a negative net worth. I was like, it can only go up from here.
But there must have been something about the vehicle and about your relationship and what you wanted for long-term freedom that just kept you focused together, which eventually did turn into White Feather. It all starts in that thing. So how did you get from that first property to the next one?
Yeah, so we had identified, okay, there is opportunity here, right? There are these brand new houses that have been foreclosed on, and they're sitting empty, and they're listing these things. The bank's listing them for like $69,000, but it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,600 square foot brand new house.
Yeah.
And so we identified one of those, and it was listed, I think, for $69,000, and we had saved up $16,000 privately to pay for our wedding. So we were engaged, and our parents we don't come from money. And so knew we were going to have to pay for our own wedding. So we had scrimped and saved everything to save up $16,000 to pay for our wedding. And we decided, driving down the hill to Morongo together, we decided, why don't we get married at the courthouse and invest this money into 6403 El Dorado? And so my wife actually agreed to get married at the San Bernardino County Courthouse, which is not a nice courthouse. and we paid like $187 for our wedding. And then we drove back up the hill, and we stopped in and we put in an offer, and we bought 6403 El Dorado for $69,000, and we rented it the next week for $975. We had a $380 a month mortgage.
That's awesome. So I have two friends who I was in law school with who both, their parents said, hey, listen, we'll pay for a wedding or we'll buy you a house. And they both chose the wedding, and then they both kicked themselves in the ass for the next 15 years. So
wow.
You made the right choice. I mean,
she made the right choice. Like, so this is something I say all the time is like, I've been blessed with an angel that is also a beast. And because she's very, like, my wife is very, nice and loving, and she's very pretty. And she, so like people look at her and they think, oh, of course, yeah, she's an angel. That's whatever. But she's also the person that was up on the roof, re-roofing with a nail gun in the middle of the August, summer, and helped me redo the flooring and scrape the popcorn ceiling and do and learn. And then whenever all that turned out to be a massive mistake, she never made me feel bad about it. She was always like, okay, well, let's figure this out. What are we going to do next? Okay, why don't we buy this foreclosure over here, get married at the courthouse, and then, and it worked out, right? We bought it in 2009, right? At the rock bottom. And then we just rode the wave up, ended up selling it later for like a $70,000 profit. And so we took 30 grand of that, and we didn't have another wedding, but we basically went on a honeymoon vacation to the Ocean Club in the Bahamas, which is an extremely nice Four Seasons. And so we spent like a week there, and it was phenomenal. And we spent a week there using money that property had generated. And so it was kind of really cool. It was a really cool moment.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the journey as well. During that time, even though, of course, that was kind of a celebration honeymoon, were you already starting to plan like, hey, how are we going to grow this? Because now you have two things that have done well, even though the first one was harder to get through. How did you start working on plans to go bigger and then involve more people?
I started educating myself. Yeah, so there's a ton of education that's out there. And there is a ton of education, as I'm sure you are very well aware of, that is very, very expensive for no particular reason, right?
Yeah, talk about it all the time.
Yeah. However, I was like, I didn't know any better. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do this, right? So I did. I read a ton of books. Bigger Pockets was just getting started at the time. Now they're really big, but we all kind of engaged in that. But I did the Rich Dad Education course and the Tigrant Learning and all that other stuff. We learned a lot from there, but then we, like you mentioned before, we put it into action. And so we did a lot of different types of things, and we had to be creative. We didn't have much money. And so we had to learn how to do joint ventures, how to get seller financing, how to self-direct IRAs, how to get private financing, and all of that, right? And how to do BRRRR strategies so we could get the money back out. So all of these things we learned and executed. And I tell people, think of education and action as your left and right leg. If you just educate yourself, you're just going to spin in circles, right? Because you're just moving your left leg. If you just take action, you're just going to spiral down the drain because you're not going to learn from your mistakes. You have to educate yourself, then act. Educate, act. And if you do that in combination with each other, it'll move you forward, right? It's an analogy I heard one time that I really loved, right? And so combination, right? We were educating ourselves and taking action. And we learned a lot of different ways to buy real estate that wasn't just your standard way of buying, right? So that's how we built it.
Yeah. Were you in one place, or were you still moving around then?
No, I was in active duty the whole time. So we moved out to Virginia. I deployed 3 more times.
Right.
And so, I was over in Afghanistan whenever, but Kimberly my wife was holding it down. She was going to all the real estate associations. She was the one taking the classes while I was deployed. And then we even purchased, I would run the numbers out of Camp Leatherneck in Afghanistan, and I would send her an email, and she'd get it the next morning because it's half a world away. And then I'd be like, okay, you can offer this much, and this is what you do with the budget and all. And so she was executing while I was in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great partnership. And I've talked to so many people, all spouses or partnerships of any kind. Everybody's on board. It's very hard to be successful as a real estate investor if your partner or even just your family is not on board with the venture. If they start in with, oh, you're crazy, go get a regular job. Did that, having you guys kind of doing it together, really help keep fueling it forward, especially because you get deployed 2-3 more times. You really need to know, like, okay, she's got it handled at home, and I can, work on this stuff too when I can.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to, man. So now I do, part of what this evolved into is people wanted me to train them how to do it as well. So I do focus on military veterans and their families, but I've trained hundreds and hundreds of people on how to do this. And one of the things that I always say is, if you're fortunate enough that your spouse is on board, then run with it. Be grateful for it. Make sure they know how grateful you are that they're on board, because the common story is that the spouse is either passively supportive or openly hostile. That's the most common, right?
Yeah.
That
one sucks.
Yeah. And you see it all the time. It's like, somebody that, like, all they're doing is saying, man, real estate's too risky, or real estate's a scam. I literally heard someone tell me, like, literally that sentence, real estate is a scam. I'm like, I don't even know what that means.
I know. That one's funny to me. I mean, but we were saying, though, before, there's a lot of shiny objects out there. So there's courses to buy. It is hard to figure out, what's what. But again, it's still like, I really think, like, even though the kind of worst objects, I still think if people take action on them, they'll work. No one's has a real estate investing course out there, even if it costs $50,000 and then the material tells you all the wrong things to do. It's in there to do. It's just that a lot of people are paying, hoping that it's going to do it, where you guys were like, we're going to take action. We're going to take the education, turn it into action, which then becomes like educated risk.
God, that's so good. You just perfectly summed it up. That's exactly right. I actually tell people, in my training, it's not an education course. It is an action course with an educational backbone, because that's it, right? You can actually, it's like Tony Robbins says, like, even if you're taking the wrong action, you're going to learn faster.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, take action, even if it's the wrong action, it'll teach you faster. Right.
Yeah.
And then be resilient enough to iterate and improve, and don't sit in failure. Right. Like, this is something that I really embrace, is two sort of fundamental things. One, everything is figure outable. it's not a real word, but in the world of Google,
it's a real thing though.
It's a real thing. I love that. Yeah, it may not be a real word, but it's a real thing. Everything's figure outable, right? Chat GPT, just ask it to build you a business model if you don't know how to build one, right? Or right? And so everything's figure outable, and there are only two outcomes in any engagement: either win or learn, right? And may God bless you with the opportunities to learn. Because if you don't, right, and another way of say that is like, may you be blessed with the gift of failure. Because if you don't, like we talked about before, like if you're just somebody who, 2001 to 2006, all you've seen is your stuff turn to gold, well, you're set up for a gargantuan fall. And here's a dirty little secret. Being poor sucks. But what sucks way worse is being poor after you've been wealthy, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't learn from failures and make yourself to the point where you can survive disasters, then you're going to face the worst tragedy, which is going backwards, feeling like you're going backwards in life, right? And then comes depression, and then comes the lack of anxiety, all that stuff, right? So
yeah, I mean, especially with for who your clientele really is, which is former military, that comes with its whole host of other options when people come home, being through battle and everything like that. Figuring out a way to start the path to financial freedom can really be a help in that time, right? I know you deal with a lot of military members coming home, but like you said, it can be a little bit aimless when you get home, and then being able to focus on this class and this education is a great thing to start pouring into. And then, ooh, look, it's going to make money, also create assets for a family. I just think real estate's a great vehicle for everybody, but I love it the way that you're helping people now who've been in your shoes, figure out something quicker than kind of coming home and trying to figure it out through a 9-to-5, which is nothing wrong with a 9-to-5. That's good to make money also. Yeah. But still, this is a vehicle that is helping.
Hey, it's Jonathan. This is just a brief interlude to talk to you about Deal Machine. Listen, I've used Deal Machine, and I was crushing it with my Concerned Citizen postcard on Deal Machine. You can look that video up on my YouTube and find out how I did it. It works. Deal Machine works. I've had David Lecko, the CEO, on the podcast. So if you want a free trial of Deal Machine, the elite Driving for Dollars app, and I'm telling you, it works if you use it correctly, you can go to my link at bit.ly/Zen Deal Machine. Now, bit.ly is bit.ly/Zen Deal Machine. It's free and you'll be up and running in 2 minutes, and then you can figure out if you want to keep it. Let's get back to the show.
I tell people, don't quit your day job, right?
Yeah, I agree.
So the fact of the matter is that everybody has free time. It doesn't. We're all busy, right? Okay. I tell people this, right? You're not too busy. You're just not prioritizing it, right? If I were to say, hey, Jonathan, or let's just say you were a normal person. I know that you're a successful person, but let's say you were a normal person, and I say, Jonathan, come over to my house and I'll teach you how to make $1 million. You'd be like, okay, well, I can't because I got to get on a plane and you'll have all these excuses. If I say, Jonathan, come over to my house and I'll give you a check for $1 million, all those excuses go away and all of a sudden you're on a plane.
Yeah.
Right? It isn't that, right? But the fact is that if I gave you $1 million but taught you nothing, that's less valuable than if I teach you to make $1 million. Right? Yet, yeah. You will get on a plane to come get $1 million. You won't get on a plane to come learn how to make $1 million. Right?
Same people. Why people will spend $20,000 on a course hoping it does the work for them instead of doing the work, and then complain that the course didn't work because they didn't do anything.
It's just about priority. It's about prioritizing, what it is that you're trying to do. So everybody has time. Even if you have a full-time job, you still have free time. And so what I tell people to do is don't quit your day job, because all that's going to do is put you in a place where you have to be able to have money, and it creates this anxiety and stress, and sellers can feel it, buyers can feel it, investors can feel it. If you're desperate, nobody wants to do business with you unless they want to take advantage of you. Right?
Yeah,
so
of course.
Don't quit your day job. Build this thing on the side. And when you do that, when eventually the income from your real estate eclipses your primary job, now you have the option of working or not.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you go from these first couple investments to White Feather and then to what you guys are doing now?
Yeah. Well, so actually, interestingly enough, when we went to sell the El Dorado property, so this was years later, right?
Yeah.
Years later, we went to sell the El Dorado property. And so we went to Orange County Real Estate Investors Association, OC-RIA, and we heard this guy speak. His name's Matt. And he had a turnkey flipping business in Memphis. So if for those of you that don't know what a turnkey flipping business, it's a business that buys old houses, renovates them, puts a tenant in place, puts management in place, and then sells it to investors. Okay.
Yeah. It's quite passive. I mean, in terms of passivity, it's pretty passive. If the funnel's good, you'll do fine.
Yeah. Yes, it is. And I actually really like that model. That model is a little tricky right now in the current market because interest rates are so high and margins are so squeezed. But, market cycle. And so anyway, he was a turnkey flipper. So we sold the El Dorado, but we wanted to reinvest that money into other real estate. So we were like, hey, what do you have? I like Memphis. I think it's a great market. So he showed us his opportunities and they were really good, really enticing, right? And so we ended up buying a couple of those. I said, man, this was a great experience. Do you have any more? And he said, yeah, I've got a pipeline of 35 of these and I'm doing about 150 a year. And I was like, this light bulb went off in my head. I was like, man, for so many years, all my Marine buddies, all I talk about whenever we're talking about what we're excited about is real estate. That's what, and I've taught people everything I can remember everything I've learned. And so that created, without me even meaning to, a cadre of people that were eagerly anticipating an opportunity to get involved.
Yeah.
And so I told him, I said, hey, I've got a bunch of Marine buddies. I can help show them how to run the numbers and how to calculate and how to evaluate these properly and then bring them to the table. And they'll buy these deals from you. And it'll be way cheaper than you listing it with a real estate agent. So why don't you just give me a flat fee for doing this? And he was like, yeah, sure. Sounds good. $3,500 at the time. Way, way less than a realtor would get. Yeah. So, but nevertheless, for me, I was like,
you're getting also first crack at the properties. You vetted them, so you know it works. So then when you the last thing you want to do is bring military buddies into like a bad situation. So you've already proofed it yourself. That's just relationships. I mean, I always talk about it that real estate is all relationships, and figuring out where the deals come is all inside the relationships that you build over time.
Let's underline that for a second for people that, right. It's clear that you are, a wise man that has learned a lot.
I think it's just this beard, right?
The beard helps. The beard helps for sure. But you're like dropping like knowledge bombs. We really are. Like the relationships that you build. Another way of saying that is the network that you build is the richest natural resource that exists.
Yeah.
The greatest deals I've ever done have been literally the biggest deal I've ever done was like 4 months ago. And it was hand delivered to me via email from somebody I work with in the network. And we did the deal together and it was the biggest bang for my time that I've ever had. Right. And it was just delivered to me. I didn't even know, I'd never even heard of this town before. Right.
Yeah.
So, but invest in the relationships, like you said, and all of the return will be there. So, yeah, so I was a very high, to your point, I couldn't leave any option for the deal to go bad. Like I had to do everything I possibly could to make sure that they were rock solid deals. Because it just, like that whole, maybe it works this way in the civilian world, and I know it does. Like, you come in and you look at an investment and they give you this like 15-page long disclaimer of like how they're not liable if anything bad happens to you, right? And then if something bad happens to you, they're like, hey, I told you, so you're, go.
Right.
It doesn't work that way in the military.
Yeah.
Right. In military relationships, it is your word is your bond, and of course we understand there's risk, but we also understand that you're telling me that that you've done this. There's a higher standard, I guess, is the point I'm making.
Yeah.
So they came in droves and just started snatching up. So this was in my spare time, right? So like I was still active duty, doing my job, and then on nights and weekends, this is what we would be doing. So in little over 2 years, we ended up collectively buying over 300 properties from them.
Wow.
And so it just went word, and it was word of mouth, right? There was no marketing, no anything. So that's how it started. Yeah. And that's when White Feather kind of went like a hockey stick.
Yeah. And so, what are you guys doing now at White Feather? Are you doing syndications, or are you finding these smaller scale deals with multiple people in them?
We're doing everything. So we do help. So the way we've got White Feather set up is you got White Feather Investments, which is the action portion, and that's where we facilitate deals. So some of them are turnkey rentals that are still around. Some of them are wholesale opportunities where we will wholesale to them and they'll buy the investment properties. We have several funds that they can invest in that buys up larger, you know how funds work, right? You buy up larger amounts and stuff. We have syndications, tons of syndications, investment opportunities, and things like that, right? So ultimately, it's about facilitating opportunities for them to take action so that they can get closer to financial freedom.
Yeah. And I mean, it has by saying like, hey, I got all my buddies in to start with the turnkey. I mean, that still has that military vibe. Like, hey, we're all in this together. Like, that's what, syndications are really like that. If you're following a good GP, like, hey, I have my money in this deal. So if you put your money in, like, we're all in this boat together. I think that's important. And that's where people go wrong in syndications. If your GP has no money in, they're not really part of the deal.
Right.
Like, where's the accountability?
Especially if they have an upfront fee structure and then no money in the deal, you're like, okay, right? I mean, of course, no GP wants a deal to go bad. But the question is, how much pain are they going to feel if the deal does go bad? It should be a lot. Right? Yeah. And deals still go bad, by the way. Like I'm in syndications right now where the GPs are amazing guys and they are feeling so much pain because they've done so much work and have not made a dollar off of this deal. They're doing so much. I'm not doing any work. I'm just I'm not getting any distributions. That's annoying. But then I move on with my day. They're flying out there, negotiating, like hammering nails in, doing all this stuff and still not getting paid for it. So they're feeling tons of pain, but the deal's still sideways. So like, I mean, and I will tell
you said it at the beginning, though. I mean, it's time. A lot of it's about time. Have you planned enough that you can get through and let it take time? Like, the market takes turns. We try to be prognosticators, but like, we don't always know. The coolest thing about real estate is there's always a lot of exit strategies. It's harder the larger it goes because there's just, you can't just dump it or short-term rental like an entire apartment complex. But I mean, that's what's cool, that real estate has different options for it. And the more options, the better. The more that one single family house or one turnkey rental can be more like a Swiss Army knife, the better, because then you can pivot. So the bigger, the better. But still, like you said, time is really the thing that's going to cure that eventually. We'll get through this time eventually. It's just if they can hang on and do what you said they're doing, which is trying to make the fixes and upgrades while they can.
Yeah, I agree. The lesson I learned at the very beginning, that time heals most wounds, not all, but time heals most wounds in real estate. I'm applying to a couple of different things I'm doing right now. We bought a bunch of land in Southwest Florida and we were going to build brand new rental properties on them. And whenever we bought the land, the future landscape looked like it would be 4 or 5% interest rates, max maybe 6%. And now we're rocking 9 on those types of deals. And it's like, okay, that makes it a negative cash flow. Not the end of the world, but should I build right now or should I just land bank? Right? And it's, that's really literally right now the decision that I'm looking at. It's like the long-term future of this area. And it's like in Fort Myers, kind of Cape Coral area. The long-term future of that area is tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how much short-term pain do I want to go through right now to get to that long-term? And that's the discussion. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, that's part of, figuring out which asset you need to prioritize at which time. That's why land's cool, though. I mean, you don't have to build on it. You're keeping it at low taxes when there's nothing on it. So it's just like, my dad used to buy land all the time and I would be like, just, what are you doing? And then after he passed away, we're like looking through these things. We're like, what the hell is this? I own like 5 acres in the middle of the woods in some place. Like he just liked real estate. And when you start to like it, you start to figure out like maybe you will do something with that someday for sure, but you don't have to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so the question that you had asked is like, what do we kind of focus on?
Yeah.
And it really depends on what the market offers. And that's what I'll say, right? Because it started out as just pure bank financed turnkey rental properties. And it worked because it was $150,000. Bank could give you 80% at, 4.5% interest. And then a couple of years went by and banks were giving you 2.875% interest. So like the deals didn't even need to be that good. I've got 6 properties right now that have got that I refinanced. They were 4.5%. I refinanced cash out of them and got 2.875. Yeah, and I did them in bulk.
Can't sell them now. Got to keep them. They're too good,
There's
right?
no way I'm going to sell them now.
Exactly.
Right? Because they're paying themselves down so fast and, and so on. So that was the model then. But there's no way that I would just go buy one of those now and get a 7.25% interest, right? And now our cash on cash return, I remember I used to, back when I didn't know anything, but I thought I knew something. I would say with White Feather, you'll never, we don't even look at deals that have less than 10% cash on cash return because that's what White Feather is, right? It's like, and now I'm like, okay, that was dumb. Right?
Yeah, so, but I mean, that's market dynamics. And I always say, like, for everybody who's a good investor has to go through the worst cycles. Len, you started right at one of the worst ones, which is interesting because you got in, almost could have had a disaster, but you fought your way through it. But now differently, going into this weird market where people are saying oh, it's a recession, but everything's selling extremely high. Doesn't really make that much sense. You've already been through a cycle that was hard, so you can figure out what to do. And that's also something that you probably want to protect others from, knowing that you've been through it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're right now, over the past year and a half, we have seen difficulty, in almost every sector, right? Because you're for instance, short-term rentals, right? There was a rage in short-term rentals, especially in Florida. And Florida, in my opinion, is one of the greatest states in the country to invest in because of all the macroeconomic forces. And the fundamentals of the demographic shifts and everything. There's so many people moving to Florida, so much money moving to Florida, and there's so much underdeveloped area in Florida. But anyway, that's not news to you. Every investor I know
I did 14 years in Florida. I lived there. So I'm on it.
People are hot on Florida, right? So you flood into the Jacksonville market and you're buying up properties and renting them as short-term rentals, and it looks great. That's awesome. But then everybody floods in and does that, and it saturates the market, and now you're getting way lower ADRs than you were before. So you have to fundamentally, right? So we see headwinds in that sector. We see, construction costs going up, right? So we've got all these construction cost increases, escalations in the build cost. And so we were going to build these things and have $100,000 of free equity right off the bat. Now that's 50 if we're lucky.
Right.
And so that shifts, right? And then the cap rates on apartment complexes getting really squeezed. I know people that are buying at 4.5 and 4.
Yeah.
Buying, right? It's you used to buy at 6 and 7 and sell at 5.
Yeah. No, they were saying the similar thing, a few years ago, everyone's saying, oh, I need an 8 cap. I am not doing anything below an 8 cap. And now they're begging for a 4 cap. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. And for those of you that don't understand what that means, you're essentially, people are paying a heck of a lot more than they used to for a less cash flowing property. Right. And it's riskier and the return profile is not as good and it's not as sexy anymore. But people are still doing it. Well, I know people that have gotten involved, and I'm a limited partner in some of these investments, where they bought these properties and they were going to do value add renovations and they put short-term financing in place, right? Because commercial financing, right?
Yeah.
And it's and so they got a 3.75% interest that when it resets at the market rate. What's the market rate right now? 8?
Yeah, bad.
So, real bad. and so you've now all of a sudden, just because of the looming financing deadline, got this property that you're this may shift into a completely negative cash flow situation. And they're really in it. They're struggling. And they're maybe we should sell it or maybe try to just preserve our capital. Hey, maybe don't go out and buy apartment complexes that have really lean margins. That's what, or commercial. You got me started now, right? So commercial office space. Do you think that's a good investment right now?
I mean, no, you can't give it away. It's very tough because for me, commercial office space would be interesting if it was easy to redevelop into residential, but it's just not.
Right.
So it's kind of is this stuff really ever coming back? It has to be repurposed to be more useful to me personally. So I don't see it. I like mixed use a lot because I like the hybrid. It already has more bathrooms because of the residential. So you have a little bit of a different option there. But I mean, I think this is what people should be looking at now. When everybody starts swimming in one direction and you see hedge funds buying short-term rentals, that should be an alert. Like, stop buying short-term rentals. Yeah. Like, if the big boys are buying that stuff, buy something else. You know, because they're going to screw up the entire market, just like they did with the flipping market in Arizona. You know, like, it's too much. Like, we don't have $800 million just sitting around to deploy and play around with. So you have to figure out, like, what's working and also what's local. You know, you're investing in markets that are all over. How are these deals coming to you, and how are you determining if these towns are viable, you know, for larger investments?
Yeah, well, we teach that. So part of the Real Estate Accelerator is teaching macro and micro market analysis. We do a whole month on it. And so we look at the macro fundamentals and, you know, the demographics and how landlord friendly it is and the tax structures and all this other stuff. And then we drill down into the cities and the towns and the neighborhoods where the micro forces, rent to price ratios and various things like that, occupancy and vacancy rates and so on. And so we do full blown market analyses on areas before we go into them. But then, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of people in White Feather that are spread out all across the country. So we prefer to do business with people that are in the community. Yeah. Because we know the trust factor and we know, you know, their level of training and everything like that. So yeah, they're emailed to me. The short answer to your question is I get emails and, you know, they'll be like, hey, here's this deal opportunity. What do you think? And then we'll get on a call and we'll take a look. I was on a call before this call that was looking at a property in Florida, 2 properties actually in Florida that are being run as short-term rentals. And he needs to raise $600K for the project. And I'm like, okay, who has a return profile of, you know, 10 pref and, you know, 20% IRR at exit and so on. But one of the things I wanted to say is you have to just fully adopt the mindset of there's opportunity in every situation. And so specifically, the deal that we did a few months ago was it was listed on Zillow. It was just listed on Zillow, right? It was an 11 property portfolio, brand new townhomes in Daytona Beach Shores. And the guy was trying to list them for, it was something like $590 a pop, right? Yeah. And that's what they were worth. I mean, they were worth somewhere around there. And so it wasn't like anything crazy, but come to find out, he was a developer who didn't actually even own these properties. He borrowed hard money on them and he had stopped paying the hard money. So he was trying to fire sale in order to try to recoup something, but the hard money lender had already repossessed them. And so the hard money lender's secretary reached out to us and said, don't deal with this guy. He doesn't own these properties. And so deal with us. And so you've got a hard money lender, right? They're not wanting to buy and hold.
Definitely not.
No, they're trying to get there because they've borrowed money at an expensive amount and they're just sending that money out at a higher rate. Yeah. And so every day that goes by that they're not getting payments on their hard money loan, they're having to pay their investors. And if you understand that, you understand they are motivated sellers. Yeah. They may be wealthy people. Doesn't matter. Wealthy people can be motivated for a variety of reasons. Yeah. And so, you know, they're probably, if these things are worth $590 a piece, you know, they are not in it for $590 a piece. They're in it for probably $400 a piece.
Yeah. And it wasn't their initial investment. You know, they were the funding. So they just want the money back so they can use it again. And that's you being smart and figuring out, like, you know, where's the leverage in all these deals. And that's just trying to figure out what the best opportunity is.
Exactly. And the answer to their prayers is speed. Right, they want their money back and they want it back fast, so they can go do.
And
they'll
take less money. They will because they want to use the money and they can't use the money because it's tied up. They need to use the money to make more money.
Yeah. So when you understand that, you understand that there are opportunities in any market. And so we were like, just okay, we'll give you $485 a pop and buy all of them from you at the same time. They agreed to it. We got independent appraisals a week later, and they appraised for $648,000 a piece. So an overall value.
You guys did well. They won't care. They got out of it fine because they had to get out of that way, and that's the win-win.
They were super happy. They were super happy. They were like, "Who cares, right?" And they were, you know, it's not like they were happy for us. They didn't really care about us, but they were happy that they were getting their cash.
Yeah, right. They're gonna be happy for the people who are gonna borrow their money at 15% and 3.5 points. I mean, that's what they want to do. You know.
That's right. So they got $5 million. that they can then, go, or whatever, what did we give them for? Yeah, $5 million. Yeah, they got their $5 million. And now they're loaning that out at 15% in 3 points.
Yeah.
What's 3 points of $5 million? 150 grand, right?
Exactly.
They don't care.
They're killing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's it. I mean, that sometimes your best deal is just to get out of it so you can redeploy the money. And I think people forget about that. You could look at everything as a loss. Like sometimes you don't crush it as much as you think, but then you go take it, buy something else. Maybe that one's a success, and you learn that with your first one that you can just like hang on. Even if it's like on the side of, the airplane, you gotta hang on, but you did it. And now look at it. Now it's still an asset that you guys maintain now.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, buddy. Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you? Is it at whitefeatherinvestments.com?
You can go to whitefeatherinvestments.com. I'm on Instagram. You can just type in Buddy Rushing on Instagram. And we do a lot of, people can connect with me via the messaging there. And
yeah.
And we also do, I put a lot of videos and content and things like that. That's like free education and, stuff like that. Also have a YouTube channel that's linked to that. It's just Buddy Rushing Official. You've got all these in the show notes. So yeah, they can just go onto all the social channels. And then, if you just Google Buddy Rushing podcast, there's several dozen that I've done talking about various things. So
yeah, well, hopefully this one will rise to the top and beat out all the other ones as we shove them down.
This is the best one that I've ever done, hands down today.
All right, man. I appreciate you, and thank you for your service. I appreciate having all the veterans on the show. I think it really gives scale to what you can do even while you're on deployment, working for your country, that there are opportunities out there to get home, figure it out. And I'm glad that you're, a big part of helping others do that now as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I've actually really enjoyed myself. I think you're a very cool, insightful, and I understand why this is called Zen and the Art of Real Estate, because I got a real Zen vibe from you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So very, very cool.
Yeah, we're trying to bring the mindful approach to real estate investing, get a little bit. I still like social media, but it's just like you have to at some point know who's, BS and who's not. And I think
Absolutely.
Podcasts are a great way to do that. Because if it's two of us talking for an hour, you're going to be able to tell if one of us is faking it. You know?
Absolutely.
So
I love that.
Yeah. If you really want to figure out if somebody is real, find them on podcasts. Like you say, do the search and just listen to them. You'll know right away, like, nope, they're not faking it. And they actually want to help people. And that's what we're here for. So I appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you.
All right. That was Buddy Rushing of White Feather Investments. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with me, Jonathan Green. And I just want to remind you, and this is always an uncomfortable part, I don't want you to think that I'm begging for you to like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you have to do for the podcast, leave a 5-star review. But if you like the podcast and you think it adds value in the real estate investing sphere, then just do me a personal favor. Like the podcast, follow it, share it when you can with your friends, and be so kind as to write a 5-star review if you believe it deserves a 5-star review up against what else is out there. I would really appreciate it, and I hope you keep listening.